The Square is a satirical comedy drama about Christian, the respected curator of a contemporary art museum that the Stockholm Palace has been converted into. A divorced but devoted father of his two young daughters, he emanates expensive confidence and empathy by driving an electric car and generally supporting good causes. His next show is called The Square, an installation piece which invites passers-by to altruism, reminding them of their role as responsible fellow human beings. But sometimes it is difficult to live up to your own ideals. Christian's foolish response to the theft of his cell phone by placing a threatening note into every single mailbox of the apartment building where his phone's GPS signal leads him eventually drags him into shameful and morally questionable situations, resulting in a major blowback, while the museum's edgy and even quite insane public relations agency is planning on launching an unexpectedly scandalous promotional campaign for the project that will plunge the museum as well as Christian into an existential crisis. The director of this film, who I believe is named Ruben Östlund, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, he has gained recognition already with his previous films, especially with Force Majeure from 2014. Now that film in comparison with The Square is a much more linear, it's a much more traditional film, it has a much clearer setup and payoff, it's much more of a drama, it basically follows one single major narrative thread, and the story of that film basically spawns out of a singular incident. There's an avalanche that happens during a family ski trip that causes a man to reflexively run away for his life instead of staying behind to protect his wife and his two daughters. Now this will cause him to have to come to the realization of the severity of the situation and for him to try to regain his dignity and to regain the trust of his family. The Square is a much looser, much more layered, much more tonally varied film. It even feels quite random every now and then, and during certain moments it even feels like quite a surreal experience, but there are some very key elements about the main character that I feel have kind of seeped over from this director's previous film, Force Majeure, in the sense that both of these characters are pretty decent guys, if pretty complacent, who really are less capable of dealing with their lives under pressure than they would like to think. And there's also this element of the guy having two young children and having to deal with all of this shit in his life while also having to be a responsible parent. Now that angle of the film of Christian having to be a single parent raising his kids should have been the most emotionally resonant one. However, to me personally it seemed like the least compelling part of the film, because in contrast with Force Majeure, this film does not follow a single major narrative thread. Quite the contrary, it tries to do so many different things at the same time, so many different things are happening in Christian's life at the same time, that inevitably certain plot lines and even certain individual scenes work better than others and stick with you more than others and become more memorable than others. An overarching theme, however, I think that resonates all throughout the film, of course, is it's about hypocrisy, it's about indifference, it's about cruelty, it's about injustice fueling more injustice. And the reason why the film feels so incredibly layered is precisely because it presents these themes as being ever present in all aspects of life, from the broader sense of the contemporary art world to the smaller scale of the individual. The insane public relations agency that has to promote Christian's upcoming exhibit really want to do it with a very strong message. So what do? They make an advertisement in which they literally blow up a poor homeless girl as a way to sell the compassion of the Square. Obviously this causes a huge scandal. Now the attack, this word attack, is a word that the director Ruben Östlund really liked to use during the Cannes press conference. He said that he wanted to make a film that attacked this world, that attacked the contemporary art world, and that made them ask questions, that made them ask the questions like, hey, are we really viewing the world that's outside of the walls of this museum, or are we just viewing them through our own lens, through our own routine and through our own conventions? Do we have the capability of breaking through them, or are we just playing our very routine-like and conventional roles? The film literally feels like an attack simultaneously on Christian, who is just losing control of all aspects of his life, as well as on us, the viewers. There are a couple of scenes in this film that can get unexpectedly tense and suspenseful, and there is one scene in particular that gets downright terrifying by the end. Obviously, I'm talking about the scene that's going to be one of the most talked about and praised scenes of any film of this year, the dinner scene. It's no wonder that's one of the most striking images of the film. It's a grand formal dinner organized by the museum for its biggest celebrities and its most wealthiest patrons, and the post-dinner entertainment is supposed to be provided by this performance artist who is pretending to be an ape, who is pretending to be a primate, and his very aggressive and intense method-like commitment to this role of being an ape goes a little bit too far, to say the least. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but that scene in and of itself is a masterpiece. That's an absolutely brilliant scene I will never forget in my life. It's absolutely brilliant from all points of view. The way it's filmed, the way it's acted, the way it's performed, the way it's paced, and just the message it conveys. No one has the balls to do something about the situation that's obviously gone out of control until it is almost too late. When finally one guy decides to finally act, then all of the others decide to simultaneously act as well. And it's a very brutal scene that really says something about humans and about humanity, that we're just a bunch of indifferent pussies. Take away all of our culture and all you have left is a bunch of primitives. We wear our black ties, we wear our fancy clothes, we go to our fancy dinners in order to indulge ourselves in the illusion that we are intellectually superior, but when it comes to instinct, we are way inferior. Primates actually do play a pretty big part in this film. The American TV journalist played by Elizabeth Moss, who Christian has to collaborate on a filmed report with, and who eventually has a romantic one-night stand with, I guess, actually has a pet chimpanzee, a bonobo to be exact, for no apparent reason whatsoever. And that does turn into pretty much, I think, the funniest scene in the entire film. I think most people would agree, because after they finish having sex, he takes off his condom, and she seems to be a little bit too eager and insistent on taking it from him and throwing it away, and he's just like, he refuses to give it to her. He's just hanging on to this condom like his life depended on it. And the hilarity continues when later on she confronts him about this evening. They are in the museum next to an installation that's like a stack of teetering pile of chairs with a guard lady like overhearing all of their conversation. It's an incredibly awkward conversation, and it just, the whole scene and the whole situation feels very caricaturist, feels very like absurd and awkward and uncomfortable and quite quirky as well. And I think it really drives home the idea that these two, they are not reacting to the situation just because they are Christian and Anne. They're reacting to the situation because they are man and woman. You know, for a man, a fling is a fling. He hopes he doesn't get her pregnant, and for him it was a good time. For a woman, however, on the other hand, you know, emotional connections are more often probably the case to occur, and it's possible that she might want him to make her pregnant, and she really wants to make sure that he is the responsible man for the job. And on this whole sociological perspective, the film really does a lot of interesting gags. I mean, I think this film presents us as Sweden in a way that I don't think we've ever seen on film before. There is a moment in which a famous artist is invited to the museum for a Q&A session, and him and the moderator are just doing their damnedest to continue on with the session, while an audience member suffering from Tourette's syndrome is continuously disrupting the conversation. But of course, there are people in the audience who are saying that, don't you dare send him away, don't you dare kick him out, we have to be tolerant to these types of people as well. Not to mention the irony of the gypsy beggars on the streets, who I'm 100% certain are Romanian, I'm 100% certain are real people, aka not actors, who are begging for change in a country in which everyone pays with credit cards. Christian even says to one of them at a certain point that, hey, I don't have any cash, but I can buy you some food. And what is her reaction? Of course, immediately a pretentious request for a very special kind of sandwich, and she specifies that she doesn't want it with any onion. The film is really an excellent satire on just the hypocrisy of the political correctness of the Western world, and of Sweden especially, because that's the place the story is happening. And the film actually does quite end on a pretty somber note. I mean, my own special personal interpretation of the whole thing is that the film kind of asks us some questions. It asks us the question of, hey, if you, either as an individual or as a collective or as a society or civilization or even as a species, realize that you made a mistake, realize that you set out on the wrong path, and you realize that you want to apologize, you want to say you're sorry, you want to make things right. Is that really enough? Does that really make things better? Does that really change things back to the way they were, or has the damage already been done? The main idea is, do we want to apologize and do we want to fix things in order to really fix them, or are we just doing it to make ourselves feel better? And I think that's one of the questions the film might be asking. And I honestly, I love this film. I didn't know anything about it before before watching it, and I was pretty much blown away by it. I still think this director's previous film, Force Majeure, is a little bit stronger, but nevertheless, out of all of the Palme d'Or winners I have seen, and there aren't many, but this is by far one of my favorites. It's very different. It's very dynamic. It's funny. It's poignant. I loved all of the performances and all of the characters, because even though all of them are pretty much douchebags, they're very charming douchebags. What can I say? And yeah, this is a Palme d'Or winner, so I shouldn't even have to say that I recommend it. This film pretty much should be seen by everyone, and I hope you guys see it, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Thanks for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so I can see you guys later with other reviews. And until then, folks, as always, don't forget to stay cool, stay awesome, and goodbye.